Expectations are the foundation of disappointment. And so if you set poor expectations and then something goes differently than expected, that's when a customer gets disappointed.
Once you know what to do, you may have a lot of work, but it's just work, and we can all do work. The stress is when you don't know what to do, and clarity eliminates that problem.
I think a lot of times as business owners, we just think of the costs that we have as assumptions in our head, and we avoid things. But it's good to have clarity, right?
Less stress, more time, more money. Welcome to the Cashflow Contractor Deep Dive.
Martin, are you moving out west or just visiting out west?
I'm flying out to California on Friday, going to a horse show on Saturday, and I'm flying back Sunday.
What in the world? What are you going to a horse show for?
Well, my wife's aunt, 85-year-old aunt, lives out there.
Yeah.
And she's had horses for 84 years. And she's very active. And she was talking about this big show she's in. And Diane and she cooked up a deal that we're going to come out and go to the show. And then we're coming home.
Wow. Okay. You seem really excited to go.
It's fine. But you know what it's like leaving town, right?
I do know what it's like.
I probably shouldn't recommend it to everybody, but I do a lot of my cleanup on the weekend. You know, theoretically, if you have an hour between coaching sessions or appointments or whatever you're doing, you can jump over there and write an article or jump over there and reconcile your bank or do all the little loose ends. But I don't really do that. It's not the best use of my time, but I don't do that. I kind of put it all together and knock it out on a Saturday. And so I'm losing this Saturday and losing a Saturday after that to a wedding and Saturday 2 weeks after that to a road trip. So going to have to tighten up my discipline.
Yeah. That's kind of maybe the downfall of working on the weekends. Is if there's an event.
Right. Well, depending on the weekends. Yeah.
Yeah. It depends on the weekend. Yeah. I mean, it kind of gets to this is more of a personal thing, but we're trying to schedule weekly dates, Pal and I, for ourselves. And it's hard to do that on the weekends because there's events, there's things that come up. And so we've actually nailed Wednesday nights down as our date night because it's basically protected. There's not, very rarely will it interfere with something, you know? And I think it's the same thing in business. If you can find a rhythm that's protected, it'll have a lot greater chance of succeeding than if you choose a time that's not protected. I try to get to it in between meetings or whatever. Well, things come up, right?
Things come up. We could write that as the title of a business book.
Things come up. Yeah, absolutely. This week we had kind of a mess, man. Did I tell you about our attic?
No.
So our house is kind of two-tier, 2-story on a part of the house, but then the garage is on the side and it's connected and it's only 1 story. And so that attic over the garage touches the side of our upstairs, and it actually touches our master bedroom and then our daughter's room. And so that attic just has blow-in insulation. It's not, foam insulated. And so it's heating up those walls in our bedrooms.
Oh, you did tell me about that. Yeah. You cook an egg on your wall if you could get it to stay there.
Exactly. Yeah. So been looking at spray foam companies, which seems like there's a lot of fly-by-night people in that trade. I don't know. Maybe I'm incorrect about that and just called the wrong people, but a lot of people just didn't answer or reply or said they would come out and then never came out. But there was a company that was pretty professional. I won't shout them out because of what I'm about to say, but they came and did the job on Tuesday, and because it was on the garage attic and not our living attic, he said, you don't need to vacate the premises. You can just stay here. If it irritates you, then just walk away. Well, an hour into the job on Tuesday, you just fumes everywhere. You can smell it. And so we got to rush to get out of there and find a friend's house to stay at. And then we've also got to go and find an Airbnb. Funny enough, we
Huh.
do get an Airbnb, and the maid had left a door. It's kind of like a closet door, but it goes to the attic and the upstairs. They left it open. And so
At
the
the
whole
hotel?
upstairs at the
Oh,
Airbnb.
oh,
And so the whole
oh,
upstairs was like 85 degrees. So, anyways, long story short, my question here for you is like, is that just poor education from the contractor of, hey, you absolutely need to vacate the premises for 24 hours, which I mean, I think maybe it was, he didn't want to intrude. He didn't want to feel like, he wanted to get the sale. And so, no, you can stay here as long as it doesn't bother you. Just, you'll be fine. Or what do you think of that situation?
hey, that's a really great question and a really great topic. We have talked about it in the past, and I call it a positioning document. But it's funny that you bring it up because it came up specifically with a client yesterday. The positioning document is what I tell people: your insulation guy's insulated many hundreds of places, right?
Right.
But most people that he works for or she works for have never insulated anything. So my point is, who knows what's going to happen? And it's you, right?
Yeah.
And the point being not the open door of the maid, but the fact that you're going to have to leave your house is something that he should know about. And it should be in a document that he goes over with. These are the things that we're going to do for you. These are the things that are likely to come up. And these are the things you're going to do that we expect you to do for us. And if, as you go along listening, the guy might not have thought, oh, I never thought to bring that up. Of course not. But after it happens once, it should go on the positioning document. That you bring it
Absolutely.
up and you tell people, okay, insulation, these are the benefits you get. This is what it costs. This is square footage. But we're going to have to cut a hole in the wall. We're going to have to take your sheetrock down. You're going to have to leave the house. You tell them that. And I think you hit on the reason that people don't is they want to get the sale. So they don't want to tell them the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a classic case of overpromising. Even if you didn't say it, you neglected to say the negatives. So it's overpromising and underdelivering. The better course of action is to underpromise and overdeliver. You tell them the things that frequently happen. They're not inevitable, maybe at the next job, but you tell people this can happen. Now, having to move out of the house because of the smell or the toxic gases in the air, you're going to tell everybody that every time. And there's just no benefit in not doing it. And you're right, people are scared that they'll lose the sale. But I think what really happens is you come across as the professional, as some, rather than a fly-by-nighter.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you have the opportunity to be extremely professional. And I think it's not even just something that you go over. I would have loved to have like a one sheet thing sent to me, like by text or email. And hey, here's the do's and don'ts. If you start smelling something, leave the house, or,
right,
just abundance of caution type stuff.
right.
If you don't have fans available, let us know so that we can bring fans over to start ventilating the property. Expect to keep your windows open for 24 hours. Like we had to leave our garage open overnight while we weren't staying there, which is kind of you can lock the door into the house, but that's not a fun thing to do. You're worried a little bit. Thankfully, we had a camera for our daughter's bedroom that we could move downstairs and keep monitor and have notifications on if there was movement or whatever. And our alarm system itself as well. But, if you don't have those things, that's kind of nerve wracking.
Because I was talking about this with a client yesterday, I have at my hand the best positioning document I've ever seen. And
have I seen this before? What is it?
I don't know if you have or not. It's not mine, so I'm not say it's from somebody from a far distant state, but I
Okay.
got my hands on it and I just want to use it. It is between a home builder and the subcontractor.
Oh, I've
Okay?
seen this. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't matter, substitute home builder for you as a contractor and your customer, but you're making things clear. And as I said earlier, the first half of a positioning document is what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
what they can expect from you, what you're going to, in essence, guarantee them. The second half is what they can expect or what you expect from them. And in this one, the home company says, the first thing you can expect or subcontractors can expect from us is that we're run a very organized system that creates efficiencies for our trade partners, our subs. Jobs are ready on time, every time. No dry runs to the job sites, no reruns to finish up, something that wasn't ready. Plans are clear and concise, no multiple phone calls, meetings, superintendents, homeowners to figure out how to do the install. Show up, do the work on the plans and purchase orders. Only need to call or meet superintendent in rare circumstances. It continues like that. They've done a couple of things there. They're telling you what they will do, but they're also showing that they understand you.
Mm-hmm.
Look what they've done there. Jobs are ready on time, every time. No dry runs to job sites, no reruns to finish up something that wasn't ready. Every contractor listening to us knows what that's like.
Yeah.
Going to be there Monday morning, you got the whole crew off another job, you show up and they're not ready, right?
Yeah.
So that's their side. On what they expect in return, they said that you complete the work and inspections by the scheduled date. This is extremely important to our entire team and to our home buyers. You will complete the work in a quality and workmanlike manner. You will have qualified lead person from your team inspect the work before leaving the job site. Do not rely on our superintendent to do quality control for your team. So it goes on down like that. There is just experience oozing off the page
Right.
from this. There's also signs of a very organized company. They're telling you your jobs are going to be ready on time every time, right? And the experience of saying, hey, you inspect it. Don't rely on us to do it. I'm not reading you the whole thing, but that's just a wonderful sheet that sets the parameters, sets the tone for the whole operation.
Yeah. And I think so much of it is not about when you're disappointing a customer, like expectations are the foundation of disappointment. And so if you set poor expectations and then something goes differently than expected, that's when a customer gets disappointed. If you're worried in the sales process that if you say this, it's going to make them disappointed, and it's before you even work together, it's before you've even really gotten a chance to prove yourself as the contractor, all that you're doing is setting yourself up for failure later on if that does happen,
right?
Because it's going to go against the expectations. But if you can have this positioning document and from the very beginning set clear expectations, good and bad, right? Then there's less disappointment. There's actually trust. There's there's understanding. There's clarity. There's excitement that, wow, I feel like I'm going to be taken care of, right?
Right.
And so I think that's what it boils down to, is just you're going to disappoint people, whether it's a sub or a customer or whatever, employee, if you don't set the clear expectations. Honestly, it kind of goes into another thing that I wanted to talk about. I'm going to go back to the attic installation later on because there's something else that came up with it. But I saw this document called A Guide to Working with Me. Have you ever seen one of those?
No, but I like the sound of it.
So it's really for that manager role. I mean, honestly, it could probably be for anybody on a team, but the one that I saw was a manager role. And it kind of reminded me of something that I've done with my executive assistant. But basically, it's a list of things that you put down that are how to work with me, right? And so it says how I view winning, and you put bullet points of how you view winning, how I communicate. This guy, he put, my style is very short, kind, and direct. I use a level of informality in business that is different for most. I'll often tangent to anecdotes that are sometimes useful but can wander. I'm not giving you the results. If I'm not giving you the results you want, ask again. I probably just didn't get it. What do I do in the ideal world? For him, he puts, in the ideal world, I get to be a visionary style role all the time. I prefer to offload all admin and uncreative tasks to others that love them. I love creative tasks. Anything repetitive, I'll automate, delegate, or procrastinate. I think of myself as best as a leader and enabler of people. I find classical management a necessary evil. I won't provide you initiative. Real world impact matters to me most. I have no time for the impractical or theoretical. Basically just wants results. And he kind of goes on, like, so it covers things I do that may annoy you or be misunderstood. And then he has, how do I best process information? Is it email, text? Is it video? Is it phone call? That kind of stuff. What gains and loses my trust, my strengths, my weaknesses, the expectations I have for my direct reports, what my logistics are. For example, he says, I do regular one-on-one meetings from day one at the same time each day or each week and each month. For small things that need to be done immediately, I prefer to receive a text message, things like that. Then giving and receiving feedback. So it just covers all those different areas of how to work with this guy and it's essentially that positioning document for a working relationship with someone.
Right. It's beautiful.
And just makes it so clear of, this is how we can succeed together. And again, it sets those expectations so that you can avoid the disappointment of the unset expectations.
That's really brilliant. I might be assigning that as a task here in the coming weeks.
Yeah. And obviously this stuff is like,
that's pretty introspective too, though.
You got to be very aware. And, you hear about those, companies doing personality tests and Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and all this stuff. And you're like, how do you find time for that? What's the benefit? But at the end of the day, that's basically what it is. You're able to have clarity around the people on your team and how you can best function together, so that then you can have clear expectations of how to work together, how to thrive together, how you can enable people. And so much of his exact guide to working with him actually resonates with me a lot. Like, there's tons of things that I do that annoy people. I am very informal a lot of times. And I'm not always the easiest to work with because of that. But also I have no problem with someone saying, hey, can we just get serious? And let's do it. You know? So
I am being serious. No, you've said it a number of times here. Clarity really is. That's the number one reason people quit. 53% of people who leave a job cite unclear expectations as the reason. And I was preparing a speech and I came across a quote by Chuck Noll, the former Steelers coach, NFL coach. And he said, stress is what you feel when you don't know what to do. I thought, that is great. Once you know what to do, you may have a lot of work, but it's just work, and we can all do work. The stress is when you don't know what to do, and clarity eliminates that problem. That's what he's doing. If you want to communicate with me, this is how you do it. That might be a little bit of a superior to a subordinate document. I can see the new hire walking in and handing the CEO that piece of paper and saying, if you want to work with me, you got to be polite. You got to call me between 8:15, whatever. But just to do that exercise is great.
Yeah. I had a lunch with a guy yesterday, Mike McConnell, fantastic person. I thought you'd find this interesting, Martin. So he is I'll go back to his career. Used to be a landman in the oil and gas industry, eventually worked his way up at Enron to be the CEO of global markets. He had 6 different global markets, literally every continent. You had
lunch with this guy?
Yeah, I had lunch with him.
Was he in prison?
He was the only executive at Enron who was not subpoenaed.
Really?
And just because he has that much character, he wrote a really great book that I actually read. Roundabout story how I even found it. It's kind of like your book, Martin. Not many people have read it. I'm just kidding.
True.
No. I mean, in all seriousness, it's a self-published book. It's not like it's a New York Times bestseller or anything like that. But I was actually at the University of Oklahoma only for 1 year when his daughter was also there, and his daughter was dating my best friend for like 6 months, and he read the book, and then I took it off of his shelf. I digress. His book is Just Because You Can Doesn't Mean You Should. And he talks about the Enron stuff, but he talks about a lot of other really great, life advice. And he ended up leaving Enron and working at a small oil and gas firm that he took public. And then in 2018 or whatever, everyone really struggled when the price of oil dropped. And so now he is the director of the energy management program at OU down the road.
Right.
And I was able to grab lunch with him. It was really great. And he's taking a completely different approach than anybody in academia that I've seen. And when he took the job, when he was interviewing, he said, I will not recruit students here if we don't have jobs for them. And that's just not something that I've seen in academia. It's usually like, hey, we're going to get you this degree. It's all about the degree. It's all about enrollment numbers inside of academia. But he's like, no, until we have the jobs, I will not recruit people. I won't even accept them into the program. And so what he's doing is he's flying to all these oil and gas companies and renewables companies, utilities companies around the nation, really. And he's talking about how great their program is. And he's actually created every single person in the energy management program at OU, which now I believe there's, a little over 100 or something along those lines. Every single one of them has an internship their sophomore year, every single one of them. And it's just a completely different approach. And now now they're starting to recruit again because they have the jobs for it. And it's a different approach than I think most people would take. And I think sometimes it takes that to run a successful operation is a different approach. And that goes back again to our positioning document. Maybe most contractors aren't going to educate on the disappointments that could occur during the job ahead of time because they're worried about the sale. But if you do things differently, people can gain your trust.
Right. And so people don't misunderstand here. It doesn't mean that you list everything that could ever possibly go wrong, because you can beat yourself out of a sale. But the things that you have experience with that are a high percentage of the time it rains and you can't pour the concrete that day, doesn't mean that you'll be there the next day because you had to go to another job. And so one day of rain might set the project back a week, but you have to discuss those things and stay in communication. So, but what you were talking about, setting a different goal, his goal is jobs, not a degree, which is magnificent. Made me think about, this is a digression.
No, go ahead.
But people always frequently talk about academia compared to those of us out here as civilians. They don't live in the real world. And, say in the real world, this is this. Well, they live in their real world, their own real world. I was just trying to think about what is it? It is different. And I think painting with a broad brush, that part of it is there are not the same consequences in academia. Read a great quote the other day that said, capitalism works in practice. Now let's see if it works in theory. Right. The problem with some of the academic stuff is I've got a great theory. Maybe I influence economics, or like Paul Ehrlich did, zero population growth, have great influence on China. That's where the one child came from. India did the same thing, have this tremendous impact. Turn out he's wrong, and there are no consequences. Those of us who are contractors and in business, we realize there are consequences. It's goodbye. I saw a bumper sticker on a car the other day, and it said, I believe, you can imagine what model of car it was and what the guy driving it looked like, but it said, I will believe corporations are people when Texas executes one. And I had to smile. I said, Texas probably executes 100 corporations a day as they go bankrupt or in default, or anyway. So, wow, that is way off of being in the attic and smelling toxic fumes. But
well, I I'm seeing kind of a theme in some of these things with the positioning document with,
Right.
subcontractors, with customers, but even then that guide to working with me. I think in all those things, really what you're doing is you're setting the stage for the narrative of how this job is going to go. Like you're controlling the narrative more or less. And I think that's something that's often not done enough in terms of how your employees interact with customers and how they understand your business. A lot of times an employee takes a job because they want to get paid. They feel like they have the skills to do the job, or maybe it's a promotion so they can learn new skills, and that they like the people they work with. But not a lot of times are they thinking about the actual customers and how you're solving their problems whenever you're taking that job.
Right.
And another great thing that I saw, especially, if you're a contractor that is fairly large and you're not really getting to onboard every single employee, that's another, manager's job is to onboard employees, train them on the systems that you use, get them set up inside of your company. This guy is basically in that position, and what he does is he records a video, and it's really scripted. The first minute is custom to that new employee. Excited to have you along. I see that you're coming from this place. Whatever personally thing he can say in the first minute. The rest is really just scripted that he resays. And in it, he covers who we are, why we exist, how we help our customers, and what we do to help them today. And so just by covering those things in that video, one, it makes the employee, the new employee, feel welcomed and like they matter because it's a personal video. But two, the first interaction they're getting with the CEO, owner of the company, is about the customers. And so they're going to take that with a certain level of, I need to be listening, and this really matters, right? And I think the more that you can take it back to the customer, a lot of times inside of your work, even at that, technician level or whatever, and think about the customer and how you're solving their problems and how you're meeting their needs. If you know those things, you do your job differently than if you're just seeing it as a task, if you're seeing it as a checklist that you've got to, check. And so I thought it was a fascinating approach to onboarding people, especially when you can't be in the onboarding process as the CEO because you're so large.
For people to look, who wrote the guide to working with me? Can we find it on
So
the
that's
website?
actually, I've actually seen that before.
Well, the one you were talking about.
The one I was talking about
website?
today, I'll put it in the show notes. It's from Twitter. He's a great follow, Michael Girdley, out of San Antonio. And he's actually got a really cool podcast called Acquisitions Anonymous, where they look at acquiring businesses and they review their financials and their basically whole setup and if it's a good acquisition or not. So that's a pretty cool podcast and a really good follow. But he's the one that did the one I mentioned. You can also search like how to work with me guide or something like that on Google, and there's several examples. I saw one a couple years back that was also really good. This one I'll also put a link to. This is Alex Lieberman, who is the co-founder of a newsletter called The Morning Brew, but he's kind of a serial entrepreneur and has started a few different businesses as well. And he uses that for onboarding new employees to his different businesses.
People listening to this, driving somewhere, or maybe me sitting doing a podcast go, oh man, I want to do that. And, or creating your positioning document, go, that's a good idea. I need to do that. And then you're starting to think, oh, when am I going to sit down and write this? Or maybe I get Chat GPT to help me write it, right?
Yeah.
But one thing you can do is, and this is what I encourage people to do, I'm still a paper guy, so carry around a notebook or however you take notes. And as things pop up, just put them on the list.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the growth of a contract. I'm sure I've talked about one of my pool contractors. His first pool just said, hey, it's going to look like this and cost this much money. And he didn't mention the gas line, the sprinkler system, the fence, the dirt that had to be moved.
Yeah.
And he wound up paying for all that. Well, those things got rolled into the next contract, right? And they continue to grow. His contract continues to grow as he hits experiences, but he has a contract to add it to. So It isn't necessarily a case of take a Saturday and sit down and create this document. It's It's get started with it and then add things as they come up and prioritize them. And I think
I think even creating a process inside of your business for writing those things down. Like every time we finish a project, we have a 15-minute meeting with technicians on the job, the project manager, and we say, what was great about this project? What went wrong on this project? What can we improve in the future? And that debrief will then create your list of things to add to the positioning document, to your contracts, to your systems, whatever it is. I think is a great process to implement there.
Right. You mentioned something else too in the name of the podcast, but business acquisitions.
Acquisitions Anonymous. Yeah.
Right. But acquiring businesses is such a great idea. I mean, it's one of those things that in theory it works. Does it work in practice? And obviously it does, because a lot of businesses are acquired.
Yeah.
But people tend to look at the financial side of business acquisitions. Is it worth it? How much capital am I going to need? But the landmines are in the cultures of the businesses. You have two separate companies doing business two separate ways with different leadership, and you're going to roll them together. And it almost always, or maybe always, that's where the problems are.
Yeah.
And the same kind of things we're talking about right now, clarity, where both sides, the acquirer and the acquiree, if those are words, you have to be clear about who you are and what you do so that people can make their choices to come along with you or maybe leave. But rolling together the cultures, I'm a spreadsheet guy, you know that. It's so easy to put numbers in a spreadsheet and multiply two of them together and get a result. It's not that easy to bring two company cultures together. And that's where the hard part is. And pretty much that's when they don't work. A lot of times that's why.
Yeah. Well, and a couple of things that you said there. I think for a lot of our listeners, they understand how hard it is to run a small business. They know the pains, the struggles, the idea of acquiring a business from somebody else. They know that they're bringing along some baggage if they acquire that, all the stress and the, poor culture fits or whatever it is. They have kind of an innate sense of, I might be getting into that, just because of their personal experiences that they've had. That's not always the case. We've had a couple of episodes with guys that I think are really great for this next segment that we're about to talk about. But Chris Edwards was the gentleman in Colorado who came from a finance background, was doing private equity roll-ups.
Steamboat Streams.
Yeah, he's in Steamboat Springs. Really great guy. Purchased a small business during the pandemic that was a flooring company. And also Countertop eventually came with it in Steamboat Springs, and he was learning the struggles of it, but he's also like doing a really good job, which isn't always the case. And I think especially with all of the COVID relief packages that the government did, and we kind of talked about that in the SBA episode, but basically we'll pay the first 6 months of your small business loan to acquire a small business and all this kind of stuff. You had kind of this flood of people that really don't have SMB experience going in and buying a contracting business for the first time because they understand the financial aspect, or because they were, operator at a large corporation. And then they start to see, oh crap, like we don't have any of this stuff in place that I had at my previous job, or this isn't just a numbers game. This is a people troubleshooting, putting out fires game. And so we've also had another guest on the episode on the show called John Matzner, really great episode on hiring talent overseas and beyond. He did a lot. He's a really great follow on Twitter if you're not following him, but he had a tweet that was, I'm just going to read some of it because I think it's hilarious. Big mistake I see SMB buyers make: cosplaying as private equity. Do you know what cosplaying is, Martin?
No.
It's costume playing. Those huge conventions where the people dress up as the Nintendo characters or whatever.
I have not been to one of those.
No, I've never been, but basically
I know
you
what
go
you're
and
talking about.
they really think they are the characters. Like their Zelda or their whatever video game character. Anyways, SMB buyers cosplaying as private equity. And he said, you're trying to buy a company from some guy named Larry. Judging Larry for not knowing his KPIs is really arrogant and wrong. Larry put his family through college off his business when you were still trying to remember to feed your Tamagotchi. I don't know what that means. Larry knows more about actually running a business than almost everyone in fin Twitter is what he's talking about, but like finance Twitter, the finance guys combined, the stress, the ups, the downs, the nerves. He's never bought a course. He never built a dashboard, and he knows more about business than all of us. If you're lucky enough to find a Larry, instead of asking him for his data room, how about you get to know the guy? Larry doesn't care where you went to school, what you used to do, or how you have a great idea for a new CRM. He just wants to know if you're a good person, will treat him fairly, and not be an arrogant jackass as he considers passing the torch. Anyways,
that's beautiful.
I think it's such a good point.
Oh, it is. And I'm writing a speech right now that I'm kind of promoting, and I've talked about it before, as the 4 fundamentals of business. And we've talked about that a lot. All true, all important. But one of the points I'm making in the talk is that entrepreneurs begin their business to do something they're good at. Unfortunately, being in the business of doing something is a completely different animal than just doing it, right? Now, private equity guys, a little bit different than that.
Right.
But it's the things that you don't know about. It's the leadership issues, these good ideas of how to work with me, how to onboard clients or customers or not customers, employees and customers. How do you build a culture, keep people from leaving? What's your leadership style? They never thought about that. How do you marketing and sales? They've heard about that, but they're not really any good at it. They just think, oh, I'll hire one of these SEO guys or a AdWords guy or a Facebook technician, and all these leads will flood in. And that just doesn't happen. And then all the administrative things. And it's, like bookkeeping and HR and IT and legal issues and corporate governance and banking and managing cash flows. When they start their business, they're just good at doing whatever they do. And it is those 3 areas that cause most of the problems. It does happen, but it's very seldom that somebody goes broke because they don't know how to pour concrete or build a house. It's one of the other things. It's people are leaving, or they don't do marketing well, or they run out of cash, or they get fined for not having workers' comp. It's those things. And that, I think, is kind of what you were saying about the man. Larry knows more than all the fintech guys combined because they've never done all that.
No.
Instead of being good at one thing they do, they're over here good at one administrative function. And they just said, well, just hire people. I remember talking to somebody, well, actually, I remember who, but I won't say, about how hard it is to be in business, how much suffering there is in small business. It's not all suffering, but there's a lot of suffering. And he said, well, like what? And I said, well, like you go out and do a job and people don't pay you. And he goes, well, he said, bullshit, I'll get paid. I go, okay. How about you start a business of getting me paid? I'll have you collect everything. Just the absolute, and I don't mean it in an insulting, I mean it in a literal way, ignorance, of people that don't realize everything. Yeah. So that's a great point that guy made. Larry knows more than.
Yeah, for sure. I said I'd go back to the out of cancellation thing, and this is something I wanted to get your feedback on. Really great guy running the company, and got to talk to him about his marketing and stuff like that, because he's got some automations that come through and, schedule, hey, we've got your appointment scheduled. We'll be there at 9 a.m. Things like that automatically send an email or a text message to the customer. Really good systems to think about. But there were some issues with them, the ones that he had set up, where, we just got off the phone and discussed something different, but then the automation went through and now I'm getting, conflicting information with what we just talked about. Also, it sends over, hey, you've got an appointment scheduled for a phone consultation, but he said he was going to be on site. So I'm like, wait, is this just on the phone? I was planning to be at home. All these things are coming up. Also, it's coming from I'm texting him on one phone number, but the automation text message is coming from a different phone number. And so all these little things coming up that you think about systems, and it got me to thinking about automations and their purpose. And I'm kind of coming to this realization, especially in the work that I do, that automations are really great internally, but can be dangerous externally. Dangerous, maybe not the right word there, but they can fail externally oftentimes. And I'd almost rather a reminder be sent to text so-and-so with a copy paste message that you can then review before you send it than just having the external automation. And there's so many dependencies. It's very contextual, but what do you think about, automations aren't something that you've dealt with probably a ton, Martin, but what do you think as the customer?
Well, I agree with you. HubSpot probably doesn't. Salesforce probably doesn't. If people aren't familiar with them, they allow their CRMs, but one of the things that they do is they allow you to set up workflows. So when this happens, then this happens. If the customer does this, then this happens. If the customer does this, then this happens. When I respond to HubSpot notifications for me, I always say, as I did yesterday, hey, this is me. This is not the software. And I see that you live somewhere, and if you want to talk, please let me know. So I agree with that. Personal's not, if it's impersonal, it's impersonal.
Yeah.
And I am using Chat GPT more and more, and I've seen it being used more and more, but I can still spot it.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
In other words, that's impersonal chat. A computer wrote it for me. But it gives me good ideas. It might give me some bullet points to consider in my correspondence. So I think that's a really good point. Automate inside, but at the point where you're actually contacting and communicating with an actual outside customer, important person, make it personal.
Yeah. And there's absolutely use cases for external that make sense, but like you're trying to get me to sign a quote, let's make that more personal rather than just an automated experience,
Yeah. I've got a haircut yesterday and I got a dental appointment in 2 weeks, and I get these text messages reminding me.
And that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. But I think more of the crucial information that needs to be passed, but there's an action item for me, let's not automate it. Just, you know? So, interesting stuff. Well, I think that's everything that I've got on my list. You had contracts that you wanted to talk about. What is that?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a little bit of a continuation of the positioning document.
Okay.
Positioning document is informal. It's bullet points or maybe letter form. It shouldn't say anything that conflicts with the contract. You're expanding it. And there are attorneys listening. They're going, well, you better watch how you do it because it might become a part of your contract. But I have a new customer who handed me 3 contracts day before yesterday and asked me to read them. 2 were to his customers, and 1 was one that he frequently signs when he works as a sub for a larger company. And of course, I bowed out and sent those to Eric Daffern, who was one of our early guests.
Yeah.
He's a construction law attorney in Tulsa. But pay attention to your contracts and have a competent attorney review them. Like my pool guy, he started adding fences, how to deal with, I'm not fixing your fence. I will tear up your sprinkler. If the gas line needs to be moved, it's at your expense. He added those in after he experienced them.
Right.
He's still adding things in. Perhaps if you went to an attorney, they could look at it, show you where, presuming you wrote it or you borrowed one from a guy, right? Oh, I got one from Ralph, and I'm using one that Ralph had. Well, when I suggest people go to attorneys, they always, or most often, come back and say, I can't afford it. And then my response is, well, how much does it cost? And then their response is, I don't know. I said, well, let's find out. Sometimes $300, $400,
Yeah.
and you can get your contract polished up a little bit and made a little more airtight. Plus, you've made a relationship with an attorney that you can call
Yeah.
and ask a question to, and might cost you $300 to talk to him for an hour. But that might avoid a $100,000 mistake,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that, a pay if paid type wordage. When we have smaller contractors working with large general contractors, there's a weight difference there. There's an experience information differential there. And they put a pay if paid clause in there, and he said, well, if I want this job, I guess I got to sign it. Well, maybe you don't have to sign it exactly that way. What does pay if paid mean? Well, I did my work and you got paid. Oh, yeah, but it wasn't for your work, right? Anyway, dealing with liens, having a process so that you can, well, that's a different subject, liens, but
Yeah.
I do encourage people to get their contracts looked at by an appropriate person and reviewed. And they might
Not your
catch
business
things.
coach. Go to your lawyer.
Well, your business coach can help you find a lawyer.
Sure.
And
He's not gonna read 'em.
actually, as I read these, I'm going, I don't know if I'd sign that, but that's not my bailiwick, and
Right.
I shouldn't be practicing law.
Yeah. Well, I think Eric's great. Go check him out. We'll put a link to him in the show notes as well if you need an attorney, probably in Oklahoma. He does work in some other states though. Yeah, I think, well, I'm not going to put my legal advice out there. So,
Well, I'll give you another example. It wasn't exactly a contract, but it kind of is an HR manual for your business.
Yeah,
and
employee handbook.
and there are kind of two ways to think about it. There are some things about how we do things, and it's kind of doing business, being an employee here, but there are also legal stuff that needs to go in there. And I suggested, it's been a couple of months, said, talking to one business owner, I said, you're at the point where you need an HR manual. He said, don't need one, got it covered. I said, really? Where'd you get it? He said, well, my brother-in-law or my cousin or something like that used to work at the General Motors plant in Oklahoma City. And he brought me one of their manuals, and that's what I'm using. Well, the General Motors plant closed in the 80s, I think.
And it changed a lot.
And it was a General Motors plant. And it was the same thing. I said, no, you need to get some advice and help you write this. It's like doing your own books. You're not going to be very good at it. It's not the best use of your time. Gave me exactly the same answer. Well, I can't afford it. I said, well, how much does it cost? Well, I don't know. Well, let's at least find that out.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great point about, I think a lot of times as business owners, we just think of the costs that we have as assumptions in our head, and we avoid things, but it's good to have clarity, right? And just say, hey, well, how much does it cost?
Well, right? and in these cases, the ones I'm talking about with contract review and an HR manual, they don't cost very much. I mean,
they don't have to.
Yeah.
I mean, they can if you want it to be super, super specific and you want to be interviewed and asked about your company, but get something in place to start, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Once you've got a manual, then you've got something when you need to add a clause, a phrase, a page, whatever. You've got something to add it to.
Exactly. So I think the last thing that I want to do to wrap up here, which I forgot about and was one of the first things I wanted to talk about.
You forgot about wrapping up?
No. You were you weren't a farmer, but you worked on a farm, right? In Nebraska, kind of.
Well, I ran grain elevators.
You ran grain elevators, so you were located near a farm.
I was located near a lot of farms. But we did have a farm, and I did raise pigs. So
okay, all right. So
that doesn't make me a farmer.
I'm going to give a farmer analogy to business, but before I do that, I thought I'd put you on the spot here and have you tell me how you can think like a farmer as a business person. Like if one of our audience members is out there, they're running their business, how can they think like a farmer to be successful?
Well, one thing that farmers do is they make a damn decision.
Okay, well, explain.
Because you have to plant and you've got a window in which to do it. And you don't get to change your mind in August and go from corn to soybeans, right? So they have to make a decision or decisions, getting a little bit in detail, but there are a lot of varieties of corn. Some mature in 90 days, some, and my farmer friends listening to this, I still have a lot of farmer friends. They'll be going, yeah, Martin.
Oh my gosh.
They'll be going,
You're butchering this.
No, they call them numbers. And they have different traits. And some mature quickly and some mature over a longer time. Part of the reasons you might expect to get better yields over a longer time than a shorter. They're now, so you're always making trade-offs and you have to make those decisions. The reason you might want a shorter season is it's wet and you can't get in till late. Maybe you don't plant till May when you'd like to plant at the end of April. Maybe you're pushed into June. Sometimes you just sequencing your harvesting. So you need something to be ready now. Not all 3,000 acres are ready for harvest on the same week. Yeah. So one of the things that's kind of neat about farming is you make your decision and then you live with it because you can't do anything about it. So
you're pretty spot on to what I'm about to get into. So I found this.
And I didn't know that. We didn't.
No, you didn't. No, I truly put you on the spot. I found this picture of a slide from a talk that was being given at a business conference, and it was called Think Like a Farmer. So I'm going to read the bullet points below it.
Okay.
You can tell me if you agree with it or not.
Okay.
First bullet point, don't shout at the crops.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that.
Don't shout at the crops.
Well, they oftentimes go outside and shout at God, because of too much rain or too little. But
okay, so here's the next one. Don't blame the crop for not growing fast enough.
Well, okay, I agree.
Don't uproot crops before they've had a chance to grow.
Yeah. Well, yep.
Stay the course. Next one, choose the best plants for the soil, which is basically what you said.
Yeah.
Make a decision.
There's a lot of science.
Right. But choose the best plants for the soil. Next one, irrigate and fertilize.
Okay.
As a business owner. Next one, remove weeds.
Okay.
And I think this is my favorite one. Remember, you will have good seasons and bad seasons. You can't control the weather. Only be prepared for it.
Yeah. It's all good.
All good?
Yeah. I have to tell you something on the, Bill de Blasio, New York governor, he made
vaguely,
or mayor, I guess, not governor, but he started, whatever. Is it de Blasio? That's not de Blasio, the
Bloomberg?
Financial guy. Bloomberg. Yeah, not de Blasio, Bloomberg. He said, hey, I deal in finance. It's not something simple like being a farmer where you just poke, he held his hands out and just poke a seed in the ground and cover it up with dirt. And I'm going, oh my God, man, you got to come out. But one of the things that they've done.
He ran for president.
Yeah. Yeah. It was it's massive ignorance.
Yeah.
He's not ignorant in a lot of things, but he is ignorant in a lot of, and he knows not that he knows not. But you talked about fertilize and water the plants. Well, one of the things that you used to have to do as a farmer was lay on the fertilizer up front. Okay. Put it on. Then you plowed the soil. You actually plowed it. They don't plow anymore. But they used to, and then you go plant your crop. So you had your fertilizer bill regardless, right? Part of the techniques are that we go along and fertilize as we go along. It's better for the plant, but also you'll see tracks of, if you watch the Tour de France, you'll see the wheat and barley fields and they have tracks in them.
Yeah.
And those tracks are so that they can go through with a machine and add fertilizer at the right times. And two things come from that. One is you don't make your whole bed up front. So if your crop gets totally destroyed by a hailstorm or a flood, you're only out fertilizer. You're out half your fertilizer. And the second thing is plants can use the fertilizer more efficiently at different times instead of just putting it all up on front. Listeners may be thinking, well, you put your fertilizer on, it's still there the next year. Some of it is phosphate and things like that, nitrogen. go off into the atmosphere or soak down into the soil and contaminate the groundwater, but they're not in the root zone where it's available for the plants. So farming is, man, we ought to do a deal on farming.
Okay. Next episode.
I mean, it is, I have a friend, former client, but a longtime friend who raises seed corn. We'll have to talk about that.
Okay.
But I went up with him, and when he was planting, he doesn't do his own planting usually, but he took me out. We got in a tractor, and he's sitting in the driver's seat, and I'm sitting in a captain's chair in the cab. And 75-foot boom, all run by GPS. He lines it out, sets the GPS, taps the throttle, and turns around and just talks to me as we go across the field. And it's planting, and it's little indicators are telling him if he'll slow down, he'll get more accurate planting, and that will be worth $9 an acre at current prices.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, and then we get to the end and we swing around, and the boom goes out over a part that had already been planted, and it'll X off the little tubes that drop seeds. It would shut them off. We weren't planting. It was up in the air. But it's, you can't believe what's going on.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Well, I think you missed to make your point here about the fertilizer, which is there's an application for that to business. Do you want to finish that analogy of not applying all up front?
Yeah.
And going,
well,
yeah.
I mean, that is an advantage that they've come up with. Same thing with us. I talked about the 3 attributes of a good business owner in one of our podcasts, seeing business as an adventure, and then being decisive.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about I said that great business leaders don't equivocate over their decisions. If it turns out it was wrong, then they make another decision. So if you can parse your decisions into units that allow you flexibility as you go forward, that's a wonderful thing. And that's the split fertilizer application.
And also, I mean, even taking that into account just in terms of inventory, right? Rather than taking on all this inventory up front, moving to more of a just-in-time inventory, and having your systems better to where you can operate on just-in-time inventory, is another application to that for sure. Well, this has been fun, man. Lots of different waves. I don't even know what we're going to title this one. You have a title off the top of your head that we'll go with?
Yeah. Split application of fertilizer in 2023.
Gosh.
Hey, we spread a little fertilizer ourselves over 170 episodes, haven't we?
We sure have. We sure have. Most people refer to fertilizer as poop, and we've spread quite a bit of that over the course of 170 episodes. All right, man. Thanks.
Okay. You bet.
See ya.
Next week.
Thanks for listening to The Cashflow Contractor. Check out our website in the show notes or visit thecashflowcontractor.com.